Always a pleasure to be here at Ner Avram, whether in the morning or the night. Now that I'm kind of a regular here, it really is a sense of coming home when I come in. So it's just a small introduction. As with everything we do, right, it really shouldn't just be a time of war, right? Our kavanah in the Divrei Torah, that should be a schus, both for, right, the soldiers to be victorious and safe in the war, for captives to be freed, for the wounded and the sick to be healed. And I just wanted to note one particular segula maybe that Chanukah has in this process. I once read a historical article about the events of Chanukah, and it translated a Greek letter, and they said there were many such letters that were sent out by the Greek army to slave traders because they wanted them to know that as they were going to conquer the Jewish people in this war, they were planning to sell prisoners as slaves and to expect a heavy influx in the market. Baruch Hashem, through the victory, that didn't come to pass. So if that was part of what we were saved from on Chanukah, so hopefully Chanukah has the ability also to help those who are shvuyim to be able to go mishibud l'geula. Okay, so Chanukah is always a fascinating thing because we have so few sources to work with, right? In terms of the early sources, we have the few dapim in the Gemara, those precious dapim in the Masechah Shabbos. We have, a couple of mentions in the Mishnah, and no Megillah per se that lays everything out. So we try to draw things from every detail of Chanukah, especially from the halachas, because the halachas teach us what Chanukah is meant to do and accomplish. Am Yisrael are not into days of commemoration, right? We have to admit that it would be silly to have a day of commemoration for the victory in that war in Chanukah when not long afterwards the Romans conquered Eretz Yisrael and kind of wiped everything out. So that same Beis HaMikdash that we lit the neros v'chatzros kodshecha ain't anymore. So we're not commemorating. What we're doing is, first of all, bringing that light into the world again. That's the power of a moed. When the Chachamim are masakin a moed, it brings that light into the world again and enables us to access it. But it also gives us action points. It gives us what to do. The question is, what are we meant to do? What do we like to look at the Ner Chanukah? We like the Ner Chanukah, but what is it teaching us? Especially because many Sfarim describe the word Chanukah being connected to the idea of chinuch. It's an educational yontiv. It's teaching us something. So I'm going to share some things based on Rav Moshe Shapiro's shiurim. Obviously, I am clipping and shrinking, right, his vast symphonic shiurim, and from the Sfas Emes and others to try to get out some of the messages. And we're going to focus on one detail of Ner Chanukah. The Gemara says, V'hilchasa, the halacha is, it was a question, do you light Ner Chanukah in the doorway on the right side or the left side? Hilchasa mismol, the halacha is you light on the left side. Kedei shetehei Ner Chanukah mismol u'mezuzah miyomin. Okay, we're not going to go into all of the complex halachas of where a person lights, depending on their building and their entrances, right, which could take hours and hours. But the ideal place for a person to light would be in the doorway, to the outside, under 10 tefachim, right, and opposite the mezuzah. Now, it seems strange, the connection between opposite the mezuzah. We understand why it would be in the doorway because we know that Ner Chanukah is one of those mitzvahs classified as pirsume nisa, to publicize the nes. So the location certainly does that. Why opposite the mezuzah? That doesn't add anything particularly to the pirsume nisa aspect of Chanukah. So the Zohar Kodesh mentions on Eshes Chayil, on the pasuk, Kol Beiso Lovush Shonim, right, that all of the Eshes Chayil's family are dressed in red wool. The Zohar says, Al Tikre Shonim Elo Shnayim. Don't read it as Shonim, right, as this type of wool, but Shnayim, pairs. For example, Mila and Priya. The mitzvah of Mila has two parts to it, the Mila and the Priya. Tzitzis Utfilin. Tzitzis and Tfilin are two mitzvahs that complement each other. In order to have the full tefillah of Shacharis, a person should be wearing tzitzis and tefillin. And then it brings mezuzah and Ner Chanukah. Mezuzah and Ner Chanukah are a pair of mitzvahs that go together. So that's our mystery to see. First of all, mezuzah is a mitzvah d'oraisa that we got long before Ner Chanukah. So Ner Chanukah was set up opposite the mezuzah, which means there's something very powerful here that they need each other, they complement each other in the message of what we're doing. So we have to spend a little bit of time looking at mezuzah. Okay, in other words, it seems strange to be going there when the Ner Chanukah is what our focus is on, but that's the mystery here. What is the mezuzah coming to tell us and teach us? Okay, we look at the mezuzah, we have certain phrases we toss out. We say it shows us that Hashem protects us. That's certainly true, and there are sources for that. People like the acronym, right, the Shin and the Dalet and the Yud to say Shomer Dalsus Yisrael, protects the houses of Am Yisrael. There's an old joke they tell about a rabbi in some town who had an acquaintance with the local priest, and at one point the priest comes over to him and he says, Rabbi, I really want one of those mezuzah things. Could you please give me one? He says, what do you need it for? It's not for you. You don't need it. He says, please. He says, my house has been robbed multiple times. I know this thing protects you. Please, can I get one? He nudged and nudged. Eventually the rabbi gave him one. Whether it had the scroll inside or not, I don't know. And a week later, the priest comes running over. He says, Rabbi, you have to do something. You have to help me. He says, what's happening? You're still getting robbed? He says, no, what do I do about all the meshulachim? Right, all the tzedakah collectors. So that's another message of the mezuzah, which says this is a Jewish house, right, that a Jew lives here and may donate. Okay, so let's try to see what the Rambam says about the mitzvah of mezuzah. Now, the Rambam, we know in the Mishnah Torah and the Yad HaChazaka, very rarely gives a little bit of editorial. One of the most famous ones is with the mitzvah of shofar, where he gives the remez, the hint in the mitzvah of shofar, uru yishen mishnaschem, right, that a person should wake up from his sleep. In Chanukah, there's a famous one where he said that mitzvah ner Chanukah, mitzvah chaviva hi ad ma'od. He said that it's a very precious mitzvah. He doesn't say that in many other mitzvahs. But in mezuzah, he also has an explanation. He says, in Halacha Yud Gimel, Perek Vav of Hilchas Tefillin and Mezuzah, Chayav Adam lizor b'mezuzah. A person has to be very careful with the mitzvah of mezuzah. Mipnei she'ichovas hakol tamid. It's obligatory on everyone at all times. V'kol zman she'ikones v'yetze yifga b'yichud Hashem. Every time you enter or leave your house, you will come face to face with this concept of the oneness of Hashem. Shmo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem's name. V'yizkar ahavaso, and you will remember the mitzvah of ahavas Hashem, of loving Hashem, because we have in the mezuzah of ahavtas Hashem elokecha. V'yeor mishnaso, and he will wake up from his sleep. V'shigyosav b'havle azman, and his dwellings, his thoughts on the meaningless temporal things that we spend so much time thinking about. V'yeda, and he will know she'ein davar ha'omid la'olam u'la'on me'olamim, that there is nothing that is eternal, nothing that lasts, el yitzias tzur ha'olam. Then the knowledge, and this doesn't just mean intellectual knowledge, but it means a true connection to Hashem, who is this strength of the world, foundation of the world. Umiyadu chozer l'daito. And when he sees that mezuzah and thinks those things, he immediately comes back to himself. And he goes in a straight path. An amazing thing, right? To think about all that the mezuzah is supposed to be telling us. And it's supposed to do something. It's supposed to wake us up, similar to what he said about the shofar. So Rav Moshe Shapiro asked, how is it that a quiet little mezuzah wakes us up? The shofar, we get how that would be a good alarm clock. But nobody has musical mezuzahs, I think. I'm sure somebody will invent one at some point. How is it supposed to wake us up? So he said we have to understand the nature of a door. Okay, a door in a house is really a miniature of the sha'ar in a city, the gate in a city. Okay, in the old days, right, cities were walled, and there was a gate. Now, what's interesting is that the gate of a city, the sha'ar of a city, is almost a pseudonym for the judges of the city. Okay, why would that be? We see that in the mitzvah of Yibum, but also Yevimto Hash'ara. So the man goes with his Yevama to the sha'ar, the bastin, right, chalitza. We find with Lot, it says, Lot Yoshev B'sha'ar Sdom. Lot was sitting in the gate of Sdom, Rashi says, because they had just appointed him to be a judge. Why would the judge be in the gate? So the nature of a gate is to control what goes in and what goes out of the city, how things come in and how they go out. Okay, that is the purpose of the gate, and now we can see why the mezuzah is so key for that. He says what wakes a person up is a change of situation. When you're in a different situation, suddenly you realize, I got to wake up. This is not the reality I was used to. I'm in a different place. I was here, and now I'm there. Right? One mashal, people are constantly saying that, the world is entirely different after this year's Simchas Torah. Right? We have to view things differently. We have to think differently. We got to rethink, and everybody's mind is furiously going, right? Depending what responsibilities they have and what and how we're supposed to do. That wakes you up. He says this is really part of who we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be people who are awake. Sleep, Shena, is the same as Yoshan, something getting old, the same letters. The idea of something which simply goes by habit, by hergel, which simply is there, that's something which isn't truly alive. Mayim Chaim, when the Torah describes Mayim Chaim, that has to be a Mayon HaNovea. That has to be a wellspring which is constantly flowing. It's always new water. It's always newness. And in fact, I think it's Maral explains that part of the message of the Ner Chanukah, right, is that it's constantly renewing. We look at a flame as something static, but it's not. It's always drawing more oil and always different and always refreshing and always renewing itself. Chaim, life which simply remains the same no matter what's going on around you, that's not really alive. It's like a pool of water, and a pool of water that doesn't have movement in life becomes stagnant. So what do we have in terms of going in and out of our house? The halacha of mezuzah tells us that the mezuzah has to be on your right side when you're going into the house. Because we say, al mezuzah's beisecha, chazal darshan, derech bioscha, the way that you're going into your house. Now the Rambam described that the mezuzah has a purpose when we're going in and we're going out. But that halacha seems to signal to us that there's something very special and important about how you go into your house and the importance of the house. Let's now think about a house for a second. A house, halachically, has this status of what's called Reshus HaYochid, right? Private domain. Now, part of private domain is that it has to have mechitzas. It has to have barriers around it defining it. Rav Lopiansky, Shlita from Silver Spring, I was listening to a shir of his, and he said he once read a biology book, a book by a biologist all about the cell. And this researcher said that sometimes people have asked him, what is his opinion? What is the most important component of a cell? And he said, I feel clearly the most important component of the cell is the cell wall. Every cell is held together by a wall. Without that wall, no matter what's inside the cell, it would decompose and be useless. So that's a very powerful picture of the importance of walls. A bayis or a Reshus HaYochid has to have walls, has to have mechitzas, so that all the ingredients inside there will be protected, won't be corrupted, and will be able to perform as they should. Now, another interesting aspect of Reshus HaYochid, of this private domain in halacha, is that we view it as something that goes up infinitely to the sky. Okay, that has lots of applications in Hilchos Shabbos, in going from one Reshus to another. Reshus HaYochid goes up. Reshus HaRabim, public domain, only goes 10 tefachim high. Okay, remember this idea of lighting the Ner Chanukah ideally below 10 tefachim. Now there's a chazal that says that La'olam lo yarda shchina lamata me'asar tefachim, that the shchina has never come down below asar tefachim. Okay, I'm not claiming to understand that fully. I had difficulty trying to digest it a bit. This is what helped me. Right? Hashem is everywhere. Okay? Uncle Moshe says it, and it's definitely true. Okay? He's here, there, and everywhere. So the question is, what does that mean? The Shekhinah is not below 10 tefachim? Is that a HaKadosh Baruch Hu free zone? So I believe the answer is the following. There's a whole question always about the idea of a place which has more Kedusha than the other. Right? Hashem is everywhere. Why is the Beis HaMikdash different than North Dakota? Why is Yerushalayim different from Australia? Right? It's a fascinating question. So someone I know, Yehuda Bullman, he said his image for it was, if you have, as we sit in this room, there are radio transmissions going through all the time. Why are you not listening to radio shows while I'm standing here, even if you may want to? Because you don't have a receiver, okay? And the better your receiver, the more you're able to receive things, right? Sometimes people can receive things from other countries, transmissions there. So the idea of a place of special ashras, ashchina, means a place where we can receive more. Under 10, there's interference. The broadcast is interfered with. Why? Because that's the place of the rabbin. That's the place of the public sphere, of the masses, and that is not the place where a person can hear clearly the voice of the Shekhinah. Okay, so when you go into your house, that is meant to be the place in which you truly are yourself. Right? In which you truly are yourself and express yourself. That's the idea of a house. Right? The Torah forbids a person who is owed money from going in, and he took collateral and gives it back to the person if he needs it, like the blanket to sleep at night. You can't just go into the person's house and take it. You have to wait outside. And I heard the explanation that the Rebbe said, because a house that a person can come in without your permission is not a house. Interestingly, there are all sorts of little exotic midrashim that refer to Chanukah. I saw Rabbi David Cohn brought down one that says that they forbade the Jews to have a door on their house. They weren't able to have that Rishus HaYachid. They weren't able to have that place where they could be themselves. So now we start to see how the Ner Chanukah and the mezuzah go together. The mezuzah especially is meant to remind us of what our house is based on. It's based on Avas Hashem. It's based on Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shamayim. It's based on remembering, waking up and remembering that nothing else in the world is permanent other than my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is the foundation of a Jewish house. Again, quoting the Talmud Rebbe, he asked a fabulous question about Pesach. One of the psukim describing Pesach says, "Benogfo es Mitzrayim," when Hashem struck the Egyptians, "Vesbotenu hitzil," and he saved our houses. Now, that's describing what happened on the night of Pesach in Mitzrayim. Everybody was packed up. Mosnechem chagurim, you had your belt on. Makelchem b'yedchem, you had your staff, your walking stick in your hand. Na'alechem b'raglechem, your shoes were on, because everybody was going to be leaving. So what houses did Hashem save in Mitzrayim? Whatever real estate these poor enslaved Jews had in Mitzrayim, they were going to be out of the next day. He said that makes clear that the concept of a bayis, of a house, to us is not walls. It's not the physical structure. It's the nature of the people who dwell within. When Am Yisrael were there doing that first Pesach Seder with full commitment to follow HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Lech Tech Acharei Bamidbar, that's the house. That's the house which is being saved. The walls, the place is meant to be a container for that, a place in which that house can flourish and can then do what it's supposed to do. The Chiddush that we have on Chanukah is that the light goes outwards. Meaning, this is an unusual time, right? This Pirsume Nisa, which is very strange, because I would think that the best Pirsume Nisa would be not to be locked into a doorway, but to put something out in the middle of the street, right? In other words, again, there are different people who add on more public displays, but the basic halacha of Chanukah is really tied into the house. All the interesting shilas going on now. Is a tank the house of the soldiers, right? To be mechayev them for Ner Chanukah. It has to be with the house. Why is that Pirsume Nisa? It's because it's transmitting the nace of the survival and the thriving of the Jewish house. It's transmitting the message of the Jewish house outwards. It's that outwards part of the mezuzah in which ad shetichle regel min hashuk, Svarim say that means ad shetichle hergel min hashuk, in which a Jew, it's true, he goes out to the marketplace. Chanukah is a work day. Everybody can be out working and doing malacha and doing their things. But the Ner Chanukah makes it tichle regel min hashuk. We don't go there habitually, same old, same old. When we go into our house, we charge up. We remember who we are. We look at that mezuzah, and we go out. It transforms the world. It lights it up for us, but it brings that light and changes the world out there. That is the Persume Nisa, right? That is what they should be doing, and it's transmitting the content of the mezuzah. That message of the mezuzah is now shining outwards, right? That's why it has to be on that other side, the side in which you're going out. As we said, the right side, derech biyoscha. That's when you're going into your house. That's what the mezuzah is. The left side, going out, when you leave your house, that's where the Ner Chanukah is. And that is where the Greeks felt that they could, first of all, overcome the Jews in that public sphere. And they wanted to break through the walls of the Jewish home, just like they broke Portzu Chomas Migdolai, making the break in the Beis HaMikdash. Chazal tell us that there were 13 breaks that they made in the wall called the Soreg in the Beis HaMikdash, which was actually that wall which determined how far non-Jews could go in the Beis HaMikdash. Non-Jews could visit the Beis HaMikdash, non-Jews could bring certain korbanos, non-Jews could daven there, as we've seen Shlomo HaMelech's tefillah to Hashem when he opened it up. But there were places they couldn't go. They broke it 13 times, and when those were repaired, Chazal instituted that by each of those repaired breaches in the wall, a Jew would bow down. So 13 is the famous gematria of echad, of one, right? They were trying to break through the oneness that's part of a Jew's life. Yichud Hashem. The Rambam said when you see the mezuzah, you're supposed to remember Yichud Hashem. That's not just that Hashem is one, but everything I do in my life is supposed to be connected to that oneness, right? My kavanah, when I say Kriya Shema, and I say that echad, long, is to be ma'ached Hashem, miyached Hashem, to unify Hashem above, below, into all four directions. That means every aspect of my life is connected to that. That's the purpose of my home, but that's the way I function outside. I may look like someone else who's doing the same kind of job, but I'm doing it entirely differently. The light of Chanukah illuminates my eyes so that I see everything differently and do everything differently. Okay, now let's take it a step further to our challenges today. Keep an eye on Mincha. The Gemara says that mipnei sakona, in times of danger, manicha al shulchan v'dayo. You light the Ner Chanukah on your table, and that's enough. Rashi says, what was this danger? So there was a religion, it still exists in tiny pockets of the world, called Zoroastrianism. Okay, use that in Scrabble. And they had, part of their rules were that on certain days, no light could be kindled. Okay, it was a blackout zone. They worshipped two gods, a god of light and a god of dark, and there were times which you could not kindle anything. So therefore, in those times of danger, put down the shutters, right? Light it on the table, and you are yotze. Now, what's fascinating is that there are many kehillas, especially among some of the Sephardi kehillas, among Hasidim, that they continue to this day lighting indoors, right? They try to do it by an inner doorway on a table. They don't even try to put it in a window. And even in returning to Eretz Yisrael, where many people are dafka lighting outdoors and such, because the problems the Ramah mentioned, whether the weather or thievery that existed in Chutz La'aretz don't exist here, they still light indoors. So I saw an explanation for this. I believe it was in the name of the Sfas Emes. I've looked and looked. I'm not finding the spot in the Sfas Emes, but the Bnei Yisachar says something similar. So why keep that? The sakana's over. Nobody has any Zoroastrians, threatening them left and right. That would be all we need to have that problem now. So you're not dealing with that, so why light inside? So he said they felt that change in the form of the mitzvah, the Chachamim made permanently. And it wasn't just because of that particular danger, but because they detected a shift in the line of battle. Meaning, until that point, the Jewish home was a fortress, impregnable, and you lit in the doorway to shine outside. They detected that the walls had already been breached, and now the battle is inside the home itself. And that has a powerful message for us. There's a phenomenon in the world now called influencers. Influencers are people who make little films of themselves, and they don't tell you to do anything. They have no power to make you do things. But as somehow they draw you into watching their little films, suddenly you want to buy the products that they have. You want to look like them. You want to do like them. That's this idea of influence. It should be noted that the Yevonim, their culture conquered the world not by the power of the sword. They didn't tell people, take Greek culture on or we're going to kill you. It was by influence. They were the most exciting new thing in the world, and it influenced everybody to want to be Greek. So that power is very important. Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky said a fascinating thing. He had tremendous chachma in Lashon HaKodesh. He said, parents are not meant to be mechanchim, not meant to be educators. Parents are responsible for the chinuch of their kids, but how can you expect a parent to be a mechanech? A mechanech is a very specific skill set. And even among mechanchim, some mechanchim are good at teaching little kids, some are good at teaching older students, some are good at teaching boys, some are good at teaching girls. How can you expect a normal set of parents to have all those, skill sets to be able to do that? He said the job of the parents is something different. They're meant to be what's called mashpi'im. Okay, hashpa is the Hebrew word for influence. Now he said influence works in a particular way. The word hashpa'ah, or influence, has in it the root shefa, which means something that comes at a slant, diagonal, and also shefa, which comes from above, right? Shipua is a slant, shefa comes down. If you put a tennis ball on a slanted roof, it rolls down naturally. He said influence is not something that's taught as a lesson. Influence happens organically. The parents are meant to try, hopefully, to be, through their excitement of what they're excited about, right? No parents had to hire a tutor to teach their kid to get excited about football or baseball, right? How does the kid get excited about it? Because his father's watching the screen and he jumps up and down when, a home run is hit or where a goal happens or something like this, and the kid asks questions, and he's in there. It's shefa, it's shipua, it comes in. So this is the battle zone that we have. Right? Again, it's technology works in different ways, and we use it in many ways for Torah, so that people around the world can be hearing the shir, participating in things. But the battle lines are drawn inside the home. Influence is a very powerful force, and if the battle is one of influence, we have to use everything we have. And we'll conclude with this. The Sfas Emes says that's why the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is Ner Ish Ubeisa. He says it's given for a person and his house, meaning his household. He says, why is this? He says, because when a person gathers together all his kochos, all his powers, and b'nei beiso hashayachim elov, and his family members around him, he can do the mitzvah in a better way. He says you have to take everything and everyone that you're connected to and to use that to transmit that light and to defeat it. That's why many Rabbanim, again, different Rabbanim have different opinions. The question, let's say, the kollel here, I don't know if it goes all afternoon as regular or if you stop early, but there are some Rabbanim who recommend to a person who's learning, so you don't have to go home to light Neres Chanukah in the optimal time. Right, you want to light in the optimal time. You're a choshev guy, but you don't want to miss your seder. So guess what? Ner ishu beis. So your wife can light, and you come home to a cold menorah and cold latkes, right? But you've lit in the chatchila time. So Rishon Zalman Paskin, I was told that not to do that, and the Talmud Rebbe explained more. Really, what this Sfas Emes says. This is about gathering all the strength in the home, gathering all the influence in the home, making the lighting Neres Chanukah an experience that remembers the message in the mezuzah and has the power to accompany you as you go out and to light up your life and the world around you. Have a wonderful Hanukkah.